if you're surrounded by people who are working towards big goals that really care about making an impact on our society and our culture, I think you're much more likely to step up, right, and to find ways to add value to others, but and to discard those excuses, those limiting kind of thoughts
Mm.
that hold us all. I mean, everybody suffers from it. To this day, everyone, I suffer from that. Everybody suffers from that, but you have to find ways to focus right on what matters the most, and then drive towards those things, and believe that you can do it.
On this episode, I'm speaking with John Pugh, owner at Pugh Management. John is a seasoned real estate executive who has found success during a career spanning 2+ decades in the design, construction, and development arenas. He leads teams to thriving project outcomes, identifies new acquisition opportunities, and is responsible for creative deal structuring. Today, Pugh Management focuses on creating value for investors and partners through placemaking, risk management, and creative problem solving. 2 fun facts about John before we jump in. Number 1, he played professional basketball in Australia. And number 2, his artwork was exhibited at the Guggenheim Museum in New York, as well as internationally. This was a super fun conversation, so let's jump right in with John. All right, John, thanks so much for joining me on Transforming Cities today. It's great to have you.
Hey, thanks, Chris. It's great to be here.
So I want to dive right in. Let's jump right into the origin story of John Pugh. I know that before we get into development, before we get into professional basketball, there is a story that is John as a youngster, and I would love to know what those ingredients were and what those bits and pieces were like as you were growing up.
Sure. It was. I feel like I was pretty fortunate. I had a great place to grow up. I grew up in the suburbs of Washington D.C. in Northern Virginia, and I ended up playing a lot of basketball, which we'll talk about a little bit. But it was a place where we were kind of on the edge of the city, right? And my father worked for the Navy. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and I don't know, just a great place to be for a while. My parents ended up splitting up. I was about 7 years old, something like that. So that was a challenge, but I think we learned. I certainly learned a lot, and grew from that experience. And I think the only way you can. But yeah, overall, it was a great place to be, great place to grow up. And we were, like I said, we were on the edge of the city, and the city was growing still, and it's grown way beyond where it was. Herndon, Virginia, which is the town I grew up in, right next to Dulles Airport. And yeah, it was a really interesting place to be. So I think, I had a farm field in my backyard. We were in a small suburban development on the edge, literally on the edge of the suburbs, and something that was kind of special. I remember seeing the first, the development that went in where that farm field was, and kind of how that. I remember that at a young age. I think that was about 10 or 11 years old when they built that, and I don't know, just kind of my first exposure to development, seeing that the creation of that subdivision,
Yeah.
and anyways, it's kind of a cool thing. And now, now Herndon is used to be on the edge of the suburbs. Now, it's farmers and such, and now it's firmly in the middle of the suburbs of DC. So
That's right. I was going to say, I spent about a decade of my life in Virginia, mostly in Central Virginia, and I went to school in, I guess you could call it Northwest Virginia, at JMU, but I was always up and down I-81
good place.
into the DC
Yeah.
area. And I remember a lot of my friends from the DC area had much more unique backgrounds in terms of friendships from classmates and just friends that they had grown over the years that came from all over the world. And one of the things that stood out from your story in some of our previous conversations is that you did have the opportunity to meet a lot of cool friends from different parts of the world, different backgrounds, obviously different cultural backgrounds to yours. I didn't get that experience necessarily. That seemed to stand out to you as something that was really important, and really you feel fortunate to be able to have had that experience with those friends.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was my mother kind of referred to my school as United Nations because there was such a great mixture of people from Asia, from Europe, Africa. We had friends from many different places, many different cultures, and it was a great way to learn about people and get to know people, and kind of jibes with my experience in basketball. Working together with people from different places and different cultures, working towards a common goal, and being able to find some
Mm,
success with that. But I think I learned a lot of lessons early on. I remember a good friend of ours was mine in the fifth grade was from Vietnam, and I never met anyone from Vietnam, and before I was 10, and we went over his house, and it was just like this really interesting experience. Different food, different ways of decorating a home, etc. And just great experience, great exposure, and really fortunate to have had that. I
mm,
feel like it was a great thing. And then, going from there in the future to Fordham University up in New York City, that was one of those experiences too, where, I was comfortable there. I think partially because I had those experiences with different
yeah.
cultures.
Well,
So
one of those friends I know was I think it was a best buddy in sixth grade. You said he was from Trinidad, and this is sort of when the sport of
yeah,
basketball started to make an impression on you and your life.
it's true. Yeah.
What was that time period like? Because I know you went from Little John to Big John pretty quickly there between sixth grade
That's true.
and 12th grade. So what was that? I guess what was that early basketball journey like with you? And I know obviously it was with some pretty cool friends as well.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. It's funny because I now coach my son's 9-10 basketball team in what the YMCA, local YMCA here, and it's funny to think about. I in sixth grade, I was just starting to kind of get involved in basketball. I was starting to get a little taller, and a kid, his name was Eric Williams. Olakan was his name, Olakan, but he went by Eric. Eric Williams, and his family was from Trinidad and Tobago, and they were like the nicest people, good friends, and he and I basically we played basketball every day after school, and we also after we'd finished playing basketball, we'd break dance. So that was a fun
Nice.
activity that I wouldn't have learned otherwise. That's for sure. But he moved from Brooklyn, New York, to our neighborhood just before sixth grade started, and yeah, so I was fortunate to hang out with him and get to know him, and we played a ton of basketball together. He ended up being the point guard, one of the point guards on our high school basketball team, and great guy. And we just, I learned a heck of a lot about the game of basketball, playing one on one against him, playing 2-on-2, 3-on-3, 4-on-4, everything you could think of, we played it, and it was literally every day. I was fortunate enough to have a basketball hoop, at basically the elementary school was right behind my house, so I was fortunate enough to be able to kind of wander over there and play whenever we wanted to. So, but yeah, it was awesome. Learned a ton about the game, got to know him better, and just one of those experiences that I think, looking back on it, allowed me to develop certain skills a lot of other big men didn't necessarily have the chance to develop because I was playing one on one over and over and over again. Where a lot of big guys, they were showing up at practice once or twice a week for their local team, but they weren't out there doing it every day. And I think that allowed me to kind of grow and get better. So.
Yeah. And you ended up being a top 100 player. You were on the varsity squad all 4 years. I think you said you were, was it 6'7" by the time you were in high school? So you're pretty big, right?
Yeah, yeah. I was invited to the NBA Players Association camp for the top 50 players in the country my senior year. I was regularly listed in the top 100, All American players in the country for my class, and it was an amazing experience. I did play all 4 years of varsity basketball. We won 3 championships, went to the championship game every year I was there. So we had a great program. I kind of I was very fortunate to have Gary Hall was my coach. He's been a very successful coach since then as well. He's coached many college and professional players over the years. He's still coaching, 30 something years at this point. He also coached Grant Hill, many players that went to Duke and ACC schools. So, I learned a lot from him about basketball, about life. I think we learned so much about life from playing sports, especially team sports. And I feel like I learned just so much about working together with people, teamwork, leadership, playing. When it's the right time to be a role player, when's the right time to step up and try to lead the team. Integrity. You say what you do what you say, right? And I think it's just it's good for so many reasons. In real estate and business, I think it's just fantastic because it sets you up to succeed because you've learned so much about, one of the things that's really important in business is, EQ, right? The emotional quotient. I think there was a lot of talk about that concept, 5-10 years ago. It just kind of hasn't been talked about much lately, but so much of it is putting yourself in the other person's shoes and understanding what matters to them and finding ways to, finding areas where you have common ground, and so you can align your priorities and work towards a goal. When you have people and when you're in the workplace. So a lot of those things, I just feel like I learned a lot. I feel like I got a great experience, both in high school, beyond high school. And it's just fun. I had a lot of fun and very fortunate to have been in a place with a lot of great people.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Transforming Cities, brought to you by Authentic. Authentic delivers premier multifamily brand experiences and smart digital marketing. Our proven approach aims to accelerate leasing velocity, boost rental rates, and increase long-term value. Simply put, we see brand as a business asset. You can find out more at AuthenticFF.com. Well, this is a huge part of your life, and I know that this is ultimately a conversation about sort of real estate and development, but I want to try to cover this base because I think it's a really cool part of your life that obviously you've just alluded to has taught you so many lessons that you've brought forth right into business, into real estate, and so forth. But for the listeners, we're not only talking about high school sports here, but we're talking about D1 college play. We're talking about becoming a professional basketball player. We don't necessarily have to dive into the depths of all those details, but what were a few of those stops, starting with the college play, and then obviously ending in your professional tenure? What did that look like? What did you kind of learn along the way? Any nuggets that you can think back to?
Well, there's lots of nuggets. There's a lot of fun. I played for Fordham University, which is the Atlantic 10 conference. At the time, it was a very strong, kind of an up-and-coming conference. Our team, Fordham, had just gotten into the conference, I think 1 or 2 years prior to my arrival, and it was still a transitional period. Having had being fortunate enough to have a lot of success in high school, I was walking into this program thinking that I was going to be able to really help lead the change that was necessary in the program to go from kind of the bottom of the conference to being more competitive, maybe the top of the conference. I didn't realize, how tough that sort of thing was because I was 17, 18 years old. You don't quite understand what's necessary, and so we had a tough couple of seasons. I feel like it was one of the lower points I think in my life. We having gone from being a kind of a top successful high school player to being on a college team. I think we may have won 4 games my first year, and then maybe 5 or 6 the second year. Right, we were 5-22, so we were just getting our tails kicked. And when you experience something like that, I think it's very easy to want to run away, right? Want to leave, want to exit. And I'd never been in a position where I was faced with that type of challenge right before, because I'd only ever played on a successful team. I'd only ever been a good player, So I think it was a great learning experience for me because it was just this one challenge after another. And so that went on for 3 years. And it culminated in and this is a really short story, but we were playing at University of Massachusetts. The coach and I had some differences the summer before my junior year, and he decided not to play me that year. As a result, he didn't want to play me that much, and I was one of the better big men on the team, and I probably deserved to play a little bit more, but it was what it was. But when we get to this game at University of Massachusetts, we'd never beaten University of Massachusetts, never beaten them on their home court at all either, and anyways, we're playing the game. It's very close. It's back and forth. Suddenly, all the players in my position foul out, and so he has to put me in the game. So he puts me in the game. The coach puts me in the game, and I scored 5 points. It had 5 rebounds, tipped the ball in at the buzzer to win the game. Fast forward, 5 days later, we're sitting in a hotel room in Philadelphia, and he brings the whole team into the room, and he basically tells everybody in the room, says, "Hey, John Pugh earned his scholarship at UMass the other night. He may never step foot on the floor again for the university, for Fordham University, but he earned his scholarship that night." So he was trying to chase me off the team, trying to get me to quit. Oof. And I remember thinking to myself, man, what is that? It was a weird experience. Wasn't sure what to think of it, being a 19, 20-year-old kid. I came to the conclusion I was going to quit. And I didn't quit. I finished the season, and I'm sitting there at home, thinking about what my next steps are and everything. And it's about a couple weeks, a month after I got home, middle of June. Suddenly I get a call, and the coach had been let go. He'd been fired, and they were bringing on a new coach who was a former NBA coach, who I knew from a previous big man camp was a great coach, fantastic working with big men. He worked with Shaq, worked with Patrick Ewing, a lot of great big men over the years. And anyways, I was super excited. Decided to give it everything I had for my senior year. I worked my butt off all summer, and ended up becoming captain of the team my senior year at Fordham. We had a successful team. We won as many games as we lost, and so it was a happy ending. He also helped, at the end of that season, he helped me prepare for free agent camp out in Oregon, where, it was some of the best players in the country, guys in the NBA, guys playing overseas. It's a collection of, it's in Eugene, Oregon, at the United States Basketball Academy. Steve Nash was there. Just a whole list of Mike Dunleavy, a whole list of great players. And so the coach sat me down. We went through this whole workout regime I had for about 2 months prior to that camp. And I knew, because there was the assistant coach, John Pugh, who's now head coach in Division I. He sat me down. He'd played successfully in Europe and Italy for many years, and he gave me this program. And he said, "Okay, if you work out twice a day, you lift weights, 5 days a week, you run sprints every day, you basically very scientifically laid out, hey, you need to be able to do these 3 things, right? Really, really well. Practice them, get strong, you'll show up, you'll have success." And I sat, I did everything exactly the way he told me, because I believed in his system. I knew he knew exactly what he was talking about. And as a result, I went to that camp, and I never played better basketball. I showed up. Ed O'Bannon was my roommate. He was also one of my teammates, and so he was really helpful with me. I helped him out. He helped me out. And just an awesome guy, great guy. And I believe he was the number 1 pick in the draft in '99, something like that, a year or two before that camp. And anyways, just a great time. I played a lot of great basketball, and got a job playing professional basketball. I ended up in Australia. Had an amazing experience there. Went down to Melbourne, Australia. I did end up getting injured, which was unfortunate, but was really lucky to have played down there. We went to the championship game. I was the MVP of the team, and just had a lot of fun. Got to see the world, and it was one of those things that very grateful for. And got to know people in Melbourne. Got to know people all over the country. And like I said earlier, when you can find ways to see like overlapping, like really reach out and understand what people's priorities are, you can find ways to work together, right? Work together and have
Mm.
success together. And I think that's like the biggest thing, the biggest lesson I've taken away from my basketball experience, and it's allowed me to be successful in business and in real estate development as well.
Well, that's man, that's an incredible. I don't even know what to say because that's such an incredible story. But I think one of the threads, at least, that came out of that was something you mentioned to me about it. That time at the free agent camp, moving through your professional tenure, you got to this
Yeah.
point where you decided to apply yourself 100%. You were no longer afraid of success, and it was this big shift, I think,
Mm.
from the early years at Fordham. And it's almost like that switch was flipped after working with some of the successful folks around you, and clearly you've taken that
Hmm.
forward in business and life and raising your your son and your family and so forth. But it's very fascinating to me that something as quote unquote simple as basketball can really force that change in you. And I think that you wave that banner quite a bit because it's so true.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think yeah, that's an important point. Like that switch kind of went on, flipped on. Whereas I think there was a many years of my life I was afraid. Afraid of success. I think I had been told from such a young age that I was going to be this amazing prodigy in basketball, this amazing basketball player, that I was some part of me was holding back, right? Because if I didn't give 100%, then I always knew I could do better, right? Or I'd have some excuse, right? And so at some point, I recognize you have to recognize that and I think it really does have a lot to do with who you're surrounded by, right? If you're surrounded by people who are working towards big goals that really care about making an impact on our society and our culture, I think you're much more likely to step up, right, and to find ways to add value to others, but and to discard those excuses, those limiting kind of thoughts
Mm.
that hold us all. I mean, everybody suffers from it. To this day, everyone, I suffer from that. Everybody suffers from that. But you have to find ways to focus, right, on what matters the most, and then drive towards those things, and believe that you can do it. And I think having some amount of success at a young age really helps with that. But anybody can do it if you just drive a little further, a little bit, just put a little more effort in. If you just commit a little bit more every day to try to get better, try to improve, you can get there. I think but it's just a matter of having just a little bit of that taste of success and knowing that you deserve it and you work for it and you own that success, right? It's a difference between owning success and walking into it, right? And I think that's the difference between successful entrepreneurs and people who kind of try a little this, a little that, and nothing ever kind of works out for
Mm.
them. I think it's a mindset thing. So I feel fortunate to have learned some of those lessons.
Well, let's pivot away from basketball into real estate.
Oh, come
My under,
on.
I mean, I could talk
Just
about
kidding.
basketball all day long,
Me too. Me too.
but I would love to hear about your path into the real estate space. And from what I know, it wasn't a straight line. Not that it ever is a straight line, but what was
Yeah.
what was the impetus to get into real estate? And did it begin at any particular time in your life, or did you just sort of find your way into the real estate industry?
Yeah, I didn't really know anything about real estate. My childhood, other than that one thing I mentioned when somebody built a subdivision in my backyard. I think my first real interaction with it, I was a young person in my 20s, and I dated a girl, and her father was a real estate developer who built the subdivision I grew up in. And I just remember getting to know him a little bit and thinking to myself, I can do that. Why can't I be in a position to be able to create places for people to live, work, and play? Like, I think that's fantastic, right? So that was something that was just this again, another light bulb moment that kind of went on. And then I said to myself, well, how do I do that? And I wasn't really sure kind of the direction to take. And so I ended up, I studied finance at Fordham University, worked on Wall Street for about 5 years. I ended up working with my boss, we designed a piece of software. It was for trading, institutional and proprietary traders on Wall Street, guys that were doing algorithmic trading, high frequency trading, and so I learned a ton about the design process through that experience. And at the end of it, I kind of came to the conclusion like this was a great experience because of the design process, but what I was designing wasn't something I was passionate about. So that led me to kind of start thinking about what can I do next. I went on a trip to Europe, came back, took 500 pictures, and 495 of them were buildings. This is around the same time. Another friend went to this graduate program. This like it's called the Career Discovery Program at Harvard University. It's a 6-week program where you go and you experience the design studio at the design school in the country, and heard about that, and had that experience traveling, and made the decision to quit my job and go to architecture school. So that was a huge leap. But the other thing is, I saw my father. My father's an engineer. He designed ships for the Navy. He spent his whole career working on defending the country and creating something that's people can use, right? That's valuable and meaningful, and recognize that what I was doing on Wall Street wasn't what I wanted to do. And I wanted to create things that, tangible things that people can touch and feel and see. And so that was really those were some of the things that led me to get into real estate. But it was through this experience with architecture, and I always enjoyed drawing and painting, and it was something that had always kind of kept, I would say, on the back burner to some extent. And then I really fully engaged with it, and was fortunate enough to end up at MIT, which is one of the best programs in the country for architecture. And what an amazing place to spend 3.5 years.
Yeah.
Super fortunate to have had some great experiences, be surrounded by some really amazing people, and people that challenge you, right? Challenge you every day. That inspire you. And I think that was just, and that decision making process was led from my experience in decision making when I was choosing at the university, college for undergrad. I kind of learned that, surround yourself with the absolute best people, right? And you'll be in a position to succeed. If you just kind of, the higher you aim, the better your outcome's going to be. I think that's really the
Hmm.
moral of the story. So, yeah, so worked in architecture, got out of school, worked in architecture for a couple of years, got my registration, a registered architect, love design. Design is something I remain super passionate about. Love the placemaking, a big piece that we're going to talk about a little bit. That's something that's really important to me. I think a lot of that, a lot of my experiences working both in design school at MIT, but also in my work experience with ORG architects and urban designers. They were in Belgium and in Boston. Really kind of got me excited about placemaking. That's kind of where some of that interest kind of came from. So it's something that's been of interest for a long time, and then but kind of peripheral, and then suddenly I identified what I wanted to do and just kind of dove into it. So
Mm. Well, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but you started Pugh Management about 8 years ago, I believe, and you've found success in the Boston market, and more recently, you've relocated with your family down in Tampa, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Um, One of the things that I've noticed about your writing, specifically your LinkedIn posts and your newsletter, is that you find you place a high importance on placemaking, and you have a really great mind around where development, architecture, sense of place, they all sort of intersect, right? And I'm curious where this interest in placemaking came from, and how it really originated for you. Kind of a big question, but I'm curious where the kind of the notion comes from, and how it's been able
sure.
to find its way into your work and sort of what you're looking to do moving forward as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think a big influence for me was my travel. I've traveled extensively internationally. A lot of that was some of that was with basketball, and then I continued that when I was at MIT. There was a series of design studios that took place, one in Paris, one in Thailand, one in Finland, and I think we learned so much by traveling, and seeing different places and cultures, and understanding how people live. And then also understanding historical precedents for design, whether they be kind of urban places or just buildings in particular, or even prehistoric settlements. Right? There's all types of different placemaking that's taken place through the history of civilization and all the cultures of the world. And I think a lot of that has influenced me just from seeing and experiencing it. And then when I was at MIT, there was a I was doing my thesis, my architectural thesis with my main advisor. I had some great advisors, and one of them, he was a brutalist. Let's call him a brutalist architect, and he was focused on creating monumental buildings that were kind of the opposite of what this group called the Congress for New Urbanism. With their kind of manifesto, they have a manifesto. What that is, and that's he told me to go read about it and then refute each one of these. I think it was like 10 or so items in their manifesto. It was really focused on the human scale, design of the human scale, thinking about the connection with the city, thinking about the relationships between different types of program, public and private, institutional, etc. And I remember reading it and thinking, I can't dispute these. These are actually really great ideas, and they're really focused on creating great quality places. So that was the first time I had a kind of exposure to the Congress for New Urbanism. I ended up becoming a board member and participating there for somewhere along 7 or 8 years. Very active in the chapter in New England, which really enjoyed. But those are some of the pieces. And then when I did my thesis at MIT, it was focused on the creation of places in the suburbs, right? In the suburbs of American cities, and how so many of our cities are this endless kind of field of sprawl, right? And they're placeless, right? Everything's kind of the same. Everything's generic. How can we find ways as developers, as architects, to create places within these large fields of endless sprawl? And so we end up using for my thesis, I end up using an approach of building. It's called a megaform, which is like this infrastructure sized building that would be created, that would create a large open kind of plaza, like an urban scale plaza. So it was like let's just call it a donut. It's a donut you drop in the middle of, and create a network of these donuts over the field
Mm,
of the city, right? So, and that's actually what's started to happen around the country. And this was 13 years ago, but since then, there's a densification that's been occurring in our inner ring suburbs that I find to be super interesting. And one example is in Tampa. It's called Midtown Tampa. It's a development by the Bromley companies. It's an example where there's work, there's live, there's play, there's restaurants, there's shopping. There's a Whole Foods, but there's also office space, and then it's all built around this kind of town square type of concept that's in the middle. To me, that sort of project is super successful for a lot of reasons. And yeah, you can make arguments about the retail being a little generic and this, that, and the other, but overall, I mean, it's a great example of what we need more of in our cities across the country. And there's been
mm,
other things that have been built that are similar to that in other places around the country, which I think are fantastic. But you know, coming back to that architectural thesis, that was really where I started to dig into and learn about the history of placemaking and the history of the city square, the city plaza,
mm.
kind of the Roman foreman all the way up today. And yeah, so those are some of the things that just kind of got me excited and inspired by it. And it's nice to see some of these places, taking place, taking
Yeah.
shape within our cities.
Yeah.
So
You've spoken very highly about your experience at Samuel and Associates, as well as Consigli Construction, working as a
Sure.
professional, right? And I'm curious, did you have any touch points, for lack of a better word, with either of those groups where you were, finding yourself becoming further infused with this idea of placemaking and what that definition meant to you as an emerging and growing professional at the time?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. One of the things I did prior to getting to Samuels, I worked for ORG architects and urban designers, and they were, one of the projects we worked on was all about building a public regional safety and fire center and a teen youth center, creating a city square there. And that was an experience, a design experience that I learned a lot from. Thinking about the urban realm and the space around and between buildings, right? Not just the buildings themselves. And then at Samuels, was the bulk of my work was focused on the redevelopment of 401 Park, formerly known as the Landmark Center in the Fenway neighborhood. It's a large, at the time, it was a 1 million square foot asset, office, retail, movies, parking garage, and it was an old Sears Roebuck catalog building, which was kind of the cross between, at one point back built in 1929, it was an Art Deco, beautiful building. And we were redeveloping it, you know, totally reimagining the ground floor retail, reimagining, the surface parking lots around it, tearing down the parking garage, putting it underground, putting up 400 apartments. So it was a, 1.3 million square foot project that
Mm.
was really sprawling, but the experience at St. Louis was fantastic because they initially came from a retail background, right? So the previous generation owned a variety of shopping centers, so they gave a lot of thought to programming and merchandising and what should be next to what and how kind of the customer would experience those different shops in that place as a result of what was the anchor at the end of the walkway, and what was the draw, right? So there's a lot of placemaking involved with retail because of a lot of those kind of decisions you have to make. So they were just like masters at it, right? They were they still own a large part of the neighborhood in the Fenway, and so we would sit with the architect and the other senior teammates there, team members, and we would talk through, what is where today and what are some of the potential tenants we could bring in, and then how can we connect these spaces and make the overall experience for both visitors and residents and the people working in the offices. How can we improve that and really make it a destination, make it a great place.
Yeah.
Fenway being already itself, Fenway Park being its own great place, but really taking that neighborhood and taking it to the next level, and that's some experience I definitely very grateful for.
Mm.
And then you asked about Consigli Construction. Consigli Construction is a family-owned business that is really on high quality design and projects, and they've built a great reputation over many years, over more than 100 years. And the project that I was brought in to work on was the Harvard University campus center, redevelopment of that. It was really a large renovation, where completely redoing multiple floors while the building was operating. It was half full, so it was a ton of construction logistics, a ton of coordination with a variety of stakeholders within the university and the public. But ultimately, it was this amazing, great place. Again, it was another historic building, designed by J.L. Surt, who's a famous modernist architect. I think that was built, I want to say it was built in 1959, if I remember correctly. And it's, reinforced concrete design, kind of a brutalist design, but the architects did a fantastic job really breaking down the ground floor and then creating this promenade, which would draw people through the building, into the building, and through the building, and a variety of retail experiences, and then connecting
Mm.
out to the student dorms and the street grid beyond. But I was fortunate to be, on the senior leadership team for the Consigli group, and we were, coordinating with the architects and Harvard University really closely, and just a great experience in placemaking, and actually like taking an idea that was the result of a great design, and then taking that and actually bringing it forth into the world. So learned a ton about construction, working with Consigli for about 3 years, and then had already, worked as a designer and worked on the owner side. So it was great to kind of have that round that experience out, and then also be a part of a team actually bringing something about in the field. So that was fun. So,
I did not think about this until just now, but I feel like you could
yeah,
easily slide into a lecturer, professor at any any high quality architecture and design school at any moment, just based on some of the things that you
nice of you
say.
to
You
say.
speak
Thank you.
you speak very well about all of these topics, which I really appreciate. And it kind of makes me, it pulls my mind in one direction, which is to say, you have a history and you have these experiences around the world, being fortunate enough to travel for different reasons so far throughout your life. You have had the opportunity to work with some amazing groups in the industry. Obviously, you are running your own business today, but this thoughtfulness that's connected between your travels and sort of the sense of place and the literal architecture of a place wherever that is in the world, is something that you always have at the ready for conversation, and I really appreciate that. So, with that in mind, if there are students listening or young professionals listening that maybe need like a top 5 or a top 3 hit list that, in your eyes, they need to go see, and why, what are a couple areas that come to mind for those listeners?
Sure. I think it's, a lot of them are, they've been talked about, but they're just great places that you need to go, right? Like one of them is Trafalgar Square in London. It's one of the main destinations of tourists in London, but it's like the heart of the city, right? When you're in Trafalgar Square, you feel the energy of the city. It's a variety of people. Yeah, there's a lot of tourists there. Uh, similar to Times Square, but there's history there. There's the scale of the place, similar to Piazza Navona in Rome, right? Piazza Navona in Rome's different though, because it's more of it feels like a place where, and it is a place where the locals are going out for dinner, where they're spending their time in the evening with their family and friends and meeting people. Uh, but the scale is similar in terms of the size of the place. It's a large, open but enclosed outdoor space with a variety of artistic and historical references, whether it be sculpture and art or some of the buildings and the facades there. And then, the Tuileries and the Louvre in Paris are just a fantastic example. The French garden style, which is something that's I've always found kind of inspiring, but it's also this representation of the history of the country itself, right? And the Louvre was the
Mm.
former palace of the emperor and the king prior to that, and it was the center of power, right, for the city and for the empire, the French Empire, and just seeing that, experiencing that history, I think is important. But it's also, again, it's this amazing place that it's on the list of places you have to go as a visitor, but there's something about it that's magical, right? And um, there's a combination of this public and private kind of influence, right? Similar to Piazza Navona, which is circled by shops and restaurants. The Tuileries has, Vendome, that whole area right nearby, and it's all just kind of the shopping and food kind of experience. So there's just like places like that. I love. And then the last one I think I'd mention is a place that we worked on an urban design for was in Thailand. It's called Sukhothai, which is the ancient capital of Thailand. It was the first capital of Thailand before Bangkok, and it's a 1 square meter complex of temples and living spaces that want to say it was built. I want to say it was built 1000 AD or so. So more than 1,000 years ago, and it's encircled by a wall. But just another one of those places that you're in the heart of this jungle, and then you're experiencing these different places, and it's been inhabited. A variety of people from the surrounding community have basically gone and moved in there. They're squatters,
Mm,
and so we were brought in to help work with the local government to think about ways in which we can provide infrastructure for the people that were already living there, while also diverting some of the traffic and other things. But just a great place, an amazing place in Thailand, in an area that not everybody goes. So that's kind of an
yeah.
off the map kind of place, but great
Off the
place.
beaten path. So if anyone is planning their design slash architecture slash placemaking trip, reach out to John. He
That's
has
right.
the punch
Give me a
list. He'll get
call.
it to you. Yep. Well, John,
Happy to talk about it. That's right.
yeah, we can't talk about real estate or development in 2023 without talking about this elephant in the room: interest rates rising, difficult capital conditions, construction costs. There's a lot of stuff going on right now that makes it very difficult to do a deal, to do development, let alone a good development project or a thoughtful development project like so many want to do. Um, your outlook, I have found to be very realistic, or pragmatic, depending on how you want to say it. Your view of the negatives today are also balanced by an optimism that I think I would love to shine a light on and just chat about and get your thoughts on briefly. So, what do
Sure.
you feel like, in your words, what are you seeing in real estate today? And how are you choosing to focus your time when it comes to opportunities at this point?
Yeah, so it's a super challenging environment. I've never experienced an environment in real estate, in the real estate industry, that was this challenging. I think when we were just kind of coming out of things in the early 2010s, when I entered the business of architecture, was quite an experience, right? Because it was still slow and people were still kind of feeling their way around to figuring things out. And then the Federal Reserve, they've been cutting interest rates for years, and we've been on until 2 years ago, year and a half ago. And so today is a challenging, super challenging environment for real estate development. I think there's a variety of challenges. Construction costs are too high, interest rates are too high, et cetera, et cetera. There's people calling, everyone's been calling for a recession for at least a year now. So going to happen at some point. I think what we're looking at today is trying to find opportunities that are whether they're existing cash flowing properties that we can invest in great areas that can allow for future larger redevelopment plays. We're very interested in those types of properties, but also finding smaller opportunities that are going to enable us to get involved in the city of Tampa, the city of St. Pete, as well as we continue to do work up in the Boston area, which is I think I'd say a little bit less risky just from a risk reward standpoint. But I absolutely love Tampa. I love St. Pete, and I think there's a lot of opportunity here over the years and over in the future, because of the fact that there's just thousands and thousands of people coming here, and they're going to continue to come here because there's so many great things about the Tampa Bay area. So I'm excited, super excited to be involved in the industry here in Tampa. Um, but one of the things that I've recently kind of shifted towards is looking to buy businesses in the real estate related areas, anywhere from construction and design services to education, also real estate education type of platforms, online platforms. Looking at creating a larger platform to build a larger business off of. So digital marketing is also an important piece of that, right? So how do we kind of connect all these pieces and add value to from one business to another?
Mhm.
So I think there's a lot of ways in which we can start to build something so that when the economy begins to turn upwards again in the future, which I'm confident it will, we'll be in a position to capitalize on that. It's a relationship business, right? Everything that we do in real
Hmm.
estate is relationship driven, and creating those long term relationships, and also investing in cash flowing businesses and assets is going to be what we're going to be doing for the next two
Yeah.
to 5 years. That being said, we're excited to get back into ground up real estate development when the opportunities presents itself. So.
You use the term micro bets rather than going all in on these big projects right now, which, as you said, risk
Yeah, yeah,
reward. I liked how you
that's right.
use that term though, micro bets. Be it
Sure.
smaller deals, hard assets, whatever that looks like. The idea of pulling
Hmm.
together a couple different income streams so that you're not putting all of your eggs in one development basket. It seems
Sure.
like the move to make, especially as a real estate
Yep.
professional right now.
Yeah, and I think we're talking about the newsletter that we have a little earlier today, and in the newsletter we're talking about the merchant build, that model, that business model, and so that's been to date that's been the model that I've employed with my business partners and investors to create value, to create wealth for our team, and today it's a real challenge to take that approach, which the merchant builder just quickly is finding a piece of property, designing, permitting that property, financing it, building, leasing it up, and then selling that property. So you build to a 7% cap rate, sell it at a 5% cap rate. Everybody wins, right? So that's been the model thus far. That model doesn't work today because interest rates are too high, construction costs are too high. As a result, your cap rates are going to be uh, they're going to need to be much higher than they currently are, and they're just not there right now. So as a result, I've really been shifting to that term, micro bets, looking for smaller opportunities to invest in things that are growing, things that we can work with the operators to help them grow, businesses to help them grow. But also things like restaurants, local businesses here in Tampa. So building out that network, building an investor network, and always excited to connect with people and find new opportunities, business opportunities together. So
Yeah. Yeah. I I'm also what is also coming to mind to me is, and this relates to sort of the general health, I would say, of the development industry right now, real estate industry across the
hmm
board. It's this what I feel like has become an emerging topic in the development scene. And knowing some of your background at MIT and some of the work you did on your thesis, I'm curious to get your take on this as we start to wrap up, and that is this idea of our country's downtowns. I've seen various articles come out about that over the last year, maybe even more so in the last
sure.
6 months. There's a big alarm bell going off right now with regards to office space. So
Yeah,
feel free to take this any way you want, but I know you surely have a few unique perspectives on this. So
sure.
Tampa's downtown, Denver's downtown, Boston's downtown. I mean, our
Yep,
downtowns are changing. What are your
sure.
thoughts? What's your take on that right now?
Yeah, I think downtowns are such an important part of our cities historically, kind of the heart of the city, right? And I think that's not going to change. I think are so much of the downtown, the reason for a downtown is the economy, right? And the economics of office space and office buildings. And what happens when you've got 50% of that space empty, right? And when there's less reason for people to be there. That's a serious concern if you're an office owner for obvious reasons. But as an urbanist, as someone who cares about the future of our cities, uh, and the economic viability of our cities, I think it's a super serious problem and challenge that we have to deal with today. I think people are taking steps. There's different cities. I know Boston's been trying to assist with the conversion of office space to residential, things like that. I don't know how much that's going to actually do for cities. I think when you really think about it, so many people have been willing to pay so much more in rent to live near their office. Uh, if their office is no longer downtown, or if they're working remotely, then what is the impetus to pay all that extra rent to have less space? What's the argument for that? So I think we're at the beginning of a serious shift in the way our cities are going, the form of our cities and the way that they're going to evolve. I think I kind of mentioned earlier, there's a distributed network model where there's a series of high density nodes where we're going to have office, live, work, and play distributed around the suburbs, around the inner ring suburbs, but also even out into the exurbs and beyond. And those nubs are going to serve as hubs, social hubs, professional hubs. But I think there's going to be less and less need for just a specific one downtown. I think that doesn't mean they're going to, like I said, they're not going to go away, but I think the dominance of the downtown is going to change, right, and evolve. And I think it's already started to happen, right? You can easily look at developments around a place like Tampa. Like I just mentioned, that Midtown project that was built. That's probably 2 miles from downtown Tampa. It's still in Tampa proper, but that's a great example of it, right? There's the Reston Town Center in Washington, D.C., in the suburbs near where I grew up. The Reston Town Center was a new urbanist design concept where they basically built this, city center in the middle of the suburbs, and now it's connected via the metro, which is the transit system there. And so you've got all these different nodes. You can talk about places in Boston and Waltham, like there's high density office corridor there as well. High tech and life sciences are there. So there's these places around the country, all cities around the city that have already begun to sprout up and to develop. And I think some amount of leadership around focusing on political leadership as well as design and development leadership around building and fostering those things in high quality ways is necessary. And so I'm hoping and planning on working on more of those types of projects because I think they're really necessary, right, for us to create great places to live, work, and play. And I emphasize the live, work, and play thing because the concept of the 15-minute city, like we want to be able to get to, your quality of life is directly impacted by how much time you spend sitting in traffic, right, or sitting on the train, or not spending time with your loved ones, or on your physical, mental, or personal health, right, or on your professional health, right,
Yeah.
in terms of your job or your business. So the more time we can spend focused on the things that we care about, the better our lives are, right? And so that's all very much tied into how our cities develop over the next 5 to 10 years, and that's going to impact our lives as well as our economy, I think, in a meaningful way. So, so I'm looking for that leadership and also hoping to provide it as well. So,
John, it's been a pleasure hearing your take on so many things. Obviously, a very well-educated real estate professional over here. I always like to end with a couple rapid fire questions to lighten things up as we bring this thing home. So the first one I'm going to throw your way is, in your opinion, what is the best basketball movie of all time that we need to go watch this weekend?
Everyone always says Hoosiers, and I almost in my mind, Hoosiers is a good movie, but that's kind of old school. And White Man Can't Jump's an old movie too. But the thing I love about White Man Can't Jump is, first of all, I was offended, right, because I'm a white guy and I can jump, right. But second of all, it's about friendship, some of the hardship that we suffer, and then finding ways to deal with each other and respect each other and win together. And that to me is what basketball is all about, right? And it's also what life's all about. So I'd definitely recommend White Man Can't Jump.
And then another key question I typically ask, because it's just, I always love the answers, is one book that you would recommend right now and why?
Sure. I mean, I've got a long list of books. But one book which is super practical that really helped me transform things in a lot of ways is The Miracle Morning. And I know it's widely recommended, but it's just one of those books that thoughtfully lays out a very clear set of things that can be done in a manageable way to transform your life, right? To basically take you from a position where you're not in charge of, what's your destiny, to being able to kind of focus on what you want to create in your life, and go get it. And so I think the miracle warning is definitely in that book. It's by
Mm,
Hal Elrod. So I'd
nice. Yeah, we'll
recommend
be
that
sure
one.
to. Excellent. Yeah, we will add that into the show notes so anyone can take a look at that as well. Well, John, it's
Cool.
been a pleasure. Like I said, there's only one more thing to do, and that is to roll out the red carpet for you. Tell the listeners and viewers what you're up to and where they can find you online.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you, Chris. It's been a pleasure being here. Thanks for having me. So I'm looking to connect with other entrepreneurs, investors looking to expand their business opportunities in real estate and beyond. I'm currently looking to purchase companies in the real estate design services and construction space. So let's connect. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Twitter, or check out my website, Pugh MGMT, PUGHMGMT.com. And I'd love to hear from you. And my LinkedIn handle is John T. Pugh, John, John Tpugh. Look forward to speaking with you.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks,
yeah.
Chris.
We'll be sure to get everything linked on in show notes. And man, it's been a
Cool.
pleasure, John. Thank you so much for your time today.
All right. Thanks, Chris. It's been fun. Take care.